how both sides' defensive systems stifled the other in possession, how Ten Hag was able to exploit Southampton's man-to-man pressing system, and what Lisandro Martinez and Varane's centre-back partnership with Casemiro in front will bring to this United side. But before I get into that, I have got a special announcement from the sponsors of today's video, OneFootball, which is now the place where on a Saturday night, if you're in the UK or Ireland, you can watch one free Italian Serie A game each weekend. As well as this, you can also use all the other football features that I've spoken about before with OneFootball. So if you are interested in watching European football, but just don't have anywhere to watch it, then you can go to the competition page linked in the description, and you can check out the free match that will be streamed this weekend. You can also watch highlights of all the Serie A games, and near live instant clips as well whilst the games are going on. And by downloading the OneFootball app, you will be helping to support the channel. So from the start of the game, we saw Manchester United using a 2-4-3-1 possession shape, with Southampton defending in a narrow 4-4-2 shape, but they weren't pressing aggressively. Instead, they were quite passive with their press, allowing United to move out of their defensive third quite easily. With Southampton's front two, Aribo and Adams, preferring to sit off the two centre-backs and cut the passing lanes into McTominay and Eriksen in behind them. Southampton's defensive shape is about being quite passive with their press, but instead pushing their backline quite high up the pitch. They create a vertically compact defensive shape, and with the two wide midfielders also holding narrow positions, this gives Southampton a vertically and horizontally compact defensive shape. And so the centre of the pitch is very congested, with Ralph Hasenhüttl's side playing with a narrow hexagon in front of their backline. If the ball gets shifted out wide into an advanced position, unlike in a conventional 4-4-2 system where the wide midfielder would be the player to move out to the flank to close down the player with the ball, instead in Southampton's narrow 4-4-2, it's the fullbacks who are instructed to move out quickly to close down Elanga and Sancho when they receive the ball in high and wide positions. We did see Manchester United's possession shape being quite fluid with their positioning, as on occasion they would transition into a 3-3-3-1 shape, with Malacia dropping and holding a deeper position, creating a back three with Lisandro Martinez and Varane. But because Southampton's pressing system was very narrow, and they were using a kind of counter press where a pass back to one of the centre-backs would act as a trigger, with one of the centre-forwards then immediately applying pressure, and everyone behind them in the midfield and defensive line pushing up onto the nearest player to cut off the passing options, as you can see here, in order to force the Manchester United centre-backs long. And so I would say for large proportions of the game, Southampton actually did a very good job of stopping United being able to progress the ball from the middle to the final third, and United struggled to move the ball forward through the centre of the pitch and were forced out wide due to Southampton's narrow shape. And it did come from the flanks where United were able to create their first big chance of the game. So the ball goes from Diego Dalot in the middle third in quite a central position out wide to Elanga on the right side, which was where a lot of the United attacks were funneled because they couldn't go through the centre of the pitch because of the sheer amount of players that Southampton had taken up central positions, really congesting that zone. But the ball goes back to Diego Dalot and he actually puts in a very good cross, and Bruno Fernandes makes one of the trademark late runs in behind the centre-back, and Kyle Walker-Peters does just enough coming round on recovery to stop Fernandes getting a clean header on goal. And from this point, pure chaos ensues in the Southampton box as a number of great blocks are made, with United somehow managing not to put the ball into the back of the net. Now you may have thought with the problems United had playing out from the back against Brighton and Brentford that Southampton would look to press extremely aggressively, especially on McTominay or Eriksen, whoever dropped into that deep single pivot position on the edge of the box. Yes, Southampton did defend well for the majority of the game, but I felt they could have used their press to really exploit United's weaknesses in possession and turn their counter press into an offensive weapon and potentially created more chances for themselves. But as I said, Southampton did stop United progressing the ball through the centre of the pitch in the middle third, and so United were forced to go out to the flanks. But this was how United would break down Southampton, and they did this by taking advantage of Southampton's man-to-man press. So despite sitting off quite passively in the middle third, we would see each of the Southampton front six, the midfield and attacking line, being assigned a Manchester United player each to man-to-man press, with the two centre-forwards on the United centre-backs, the two central midfielders for Southampton pushing up onto United's double pivot, and the wide midfielders looking to press United's fullbacks Malacia and Dalot. However, a man-to-man press is obviously a lot more riskier than a zonal press. As a zonal press, you are essentially pressing the space, so when a player moves into that area, that then becomes a player you pick up, whereas in a man-to-man press, each player is designated with a certain player to follow. So the opposition side, in this case Manchester United, are able to use the positioning of their players in possession to change the defensive positioning of the Southampton players, and therefore change the overall Southampton defensive shape. And this was where Bruno Fernandes' goal came from. So because Southampton are using a man-to-man marking system with quite a passive press, this allowed both Lisandro Martinez and Rafa Varane space and time on the ball either side of the two centre forwards. And in order to really take advantage of a man man-to-man system, what you actually need to do is firstly instruct some of your players to make runs away from certain zones, dragging the opposition player away from there and subsequently creating space for the player with the ball to drive forward. This is what Raphael Varane does here, and Adam Armstrong, who's the left midfielder who would otherwise be covering Elanga, is forced into a decision. Either he can hold a position slightly wider, closing off the space for Elanga, but in doing so he would allow Varane more space to travel forward with the ball into the Southampton half. He instead opts to close down Raphael Varane, moving into a higher and narrower position, but in doing so leaves Elanga completely open, and Varane just pushes the ball onto Elanga on the right flank. But when the ball moves into Elanga, United still haven't beaten the Southampton midfield line, but Elanga is direct and he carries the ball past Armstrong and then finds a forward pass into Jadon Sancho between the line. And I do think this kind of ball carrying ability and willingness to look for a forward pass to move the ball into the attacking third is something that United do lack from those deeper positions, and this actually came from Dalot moving higher up the flank, allowing Elanga to then drop into that space and receive the ball in a deeper position on the flank, and this comes from the interplay of positions that Ten Hag allows in his system. Under Ranić and Solskjaer, the positioning of United when in possession was very rigid, and you rarely saw players into switch positions, and just overall United in the past 2 to 3 years have had a lot less fluidity in their possession system than we see from Ten Hag's. If Dalot had maintained a more conventional right back position in possession, then Elanga doesn't have this space to drop into, and so if he wants to receive the ball to feet, he's forced to do it higher up the pitch, where he would then be put under pressure immediately from the left back Djenepo when he received the ball. But when he switches positions with Dalot, he's able to be the player to progress the ball into the final third, rather than the player to receive it in the final third. Ahead of Elanga, Sancho has actually moved into a central position, with Rashford holding a wider position on the left, and I do quite like this positional versatility between Sancho and Rashford, as with the ball on the right side of Elanga, it's clear that the player on the far left where Rashford is positioned is going to be the player who's going to be most likely getting into a goal scoring position as the ball moves into the final third, and the player who is closer on the right side where Sancho is a player to really link the attack, and I would say that Sancho is much better at linking the play than scoring, and vice versa for Rashford, who can use his pace to make a run in behind the back line or look to get across his man from a crossing position. And this is what happens. Sancho moves the ball out well to Dalot, and I think Dalot's cross is absolutely perfect. A lot of right backs in this position may have looked to just put the ball across the box looking for Rashford's run, but this is quite a low probability cross, and so Dalot instead has a vision to see Fernandes on the edge of the box, and Rashford's run is perfect because if he holds a position, then the right back Cole Walker-Peters is going to be in this area that Fernandes wants to run into, and so Rashford's run taking Cole Walker-Peters towards goal actually opens up that space for Fernandes to run into, and the cross comes into Fernandes at the perfect height and with the perfect weight, and he side foot volleys the ball into the ground and into the bottom corner, giving Manchester United the lead. But I do think that United were kind of fortunate to come out of this game with a win, as they only recorded an XG of 1.34, which was just less than Southampton's, which was 1.36, showing that this was a game where there weren't that many high quality chances created. And I think this stemmed from both sides being well organised and coordinated out of possession, whilst both lacked a degree of creativity when they had possession. See, Southampton's 2 centre forwards and really the whole front 6 in the midfield and offensive line did a very good job of maintaining a narrow position and cutting the passing lanes into McTominay and Eriksen. However, this is a precise tactical situation where United need a regista who's not only press resistant but can also engage in quick one-touch passes to play around the opposition's press. And this is something that Scott McTominay definitely struggles with, and even Eriksen isn't the best at playing these quick passes with his back to goal. And you can see how important it is when you look at sides like Barcelona and Manchester City, and in particular players like Rodri and Busquets, who are so good at receiving the ball and moving the ball on as efficiently as possible. And when you come up against a narrow, compact defensive unit like Southampton's in this game, and you can see how United do prefer to play against teams that push higher up the pitch and do look to press them a lot more aggressively than Southampton were willing to do, certainly in the middle third, because against Liverpool the space was there in the centre of midfield for United to transition the attack quickly and allow the players from wide positions to make runs in behind the back line, as Rashford did for the second goal against Liverpool. But obviously in this game, because Southampton's midfield and defensive lines did sit a bit deeper, that space wasn't there, and so United were forced out wide, and so their best opportunities to break Southampton down would obviously come from crossing situations, which we definitely saw in the first half with that massive scramble in the Southampton box, and then for Fernandes' eventual goal. I think Ten Hag's side should have been switching switching the play a lot quicker, as against this Southampton defensive shape where they play a 4-4-2 but the wide midfielders, when the boys on the opposite side, tuck in very narrow, playing almost like a wide central midfielder, leave space on the opposite flank, so if United were able to get the ball into someone like Scott McTominay or one of the other central midfielders, or even probably Varane or Lisandro Martinez, and get them to play a long pass over to the other flank, then this would have allowed them to attack down that side where the space is, because Southampton's defensive system has shifted over all the way to the far side. And maybe Ten Hag should have put more emphasis on this approach, but we did see that Ten Hag probably had the idea of isolating the fullbacks against the wingers Elanga and Sancho, because he did keep Malacia and Dalot quite deep in the middle third, which draws the wide midfielders higher up the pitch, and therefore leaves more space for Elanga and Sancho if they receive the ball, isolating the fullback in a 1v1. Now, I did think that Manchester United were a lot better out of possession than they were with the ball, and like Ralph Hasenhüttl's side, Manchester United's defensive shape was very effective at stopping Southampton being able to progress the ball out of their own half. United's defensive shape was a 4-2-3-1, however, because they would man-to-man press Southampton in the middle of the park, when James Ward-Prowse would drop deep alongside Lavia, this would force Christian Eriksen to push up alongside Bruno Fernandes, giving Manchester United a 4-1-4-1 pressing shape temporarily. Now, Southampton did want to play out from the back, but they weren't sticking to it rigidly, and so when United did push high up the pitch, they were willing to go long from the goalkeeper, targeting Shea Adams against Lisandro Martinez. However, the Argentine centre-back actually did quite well in aerial duels, winning 5 out of 5, and so Southampton, rather than flicking the ball on into the final third, were instead having to pick up second balls in the middle third. And United were very good at stopping Southampton moving the ball through the middle of the pitch, and using their press to force Southampton out wide, and in the end force them into a long ball from where they could then win the ball back and regain possession. We can see here that Sancho, Eriksen and Fernandes are all man-to-man pressing the Southampton players on their right side, and Marcus Rashford, rather than pressing Bella Kotchap from a goal side position, instead approaches him in a way that cuts off the pass back across the goal to the goalkeeper or Salisu on the left side. And so now the Southampton right-sided centre-back has to move forward with the ball and will most likely be forced into a long pass up the pitch. I think United look a lot better with Lisandro Martinez and Rafa Varane at centre-back than with Harry Maguire, and this is because both players seem to know exactly what they should be doing, are very assertive and aggressive with their actions, which just provides a lot more confidence to the fullbacks and central midfielders around them. I think United showed that when they do come up against deep defensive blocks, their lack of creativity in the centre of midfield, and really their ability to move the ball forward through congested areas, is still a major concern, as United, to be honest, didn't create much of substance, and Fernandes' goal really came from more of a half chance, I would say. I think we did see where Casemiro will improve United. There were a couple of times throughout the game where Southampton were able to win the second ball in the centre of midfield and then directly look for a vertical pass forward, and I did think Southampton were able to break through the centre of the pitch away from McTominay and Eriksen far too easily, but once Casemiro fully comes into that double pivot, I think we will see United with the ability of stopping an attack higher up the pitch rather than allowing them to progress the ball into the United defensive third. When Casemiro came on, he showed that aggression to break up the play that had been lacking with McTominay and Eriksen there, and he was particularly effective at winning aerial duels, which should help Lisandro Martinez behind him when sides like Brentford and Brighton and Southampton in this game look to target the Argentinian in the air. So overall, I definitely think United won this game because of their defensive security, which allowed them to just score one goal and hold out for the win, when last season they probably would have dropped points in this type of game. As with players like Maguire and Shaw in the back line, you always felt that Manchester United had to score more than one to win a game, because there was always a high possibility of a defensive mistake occurring. But despite probably deserving a draw with quite a low XG in this game, United were able to take all 3 points, and most Ten Hag's team do look completely different with Lisandro Martinez, Varane and now Casemiro in the side. There definitely are still some problems, particularly in possession, that I would be looking out for. So let me know what you thought of this game in the comment section below. Check out some of my other videos in the description. Give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you do get notified when my videos come out.